We talk so much in the doll world about the wonderful dolls of Leon Casimir Bru and the Gemot family, and they certainly deserve all the accolades they get. But there are so many other inventions that were going on in the world of the French poupée in the 1860s that some people really get overlooked in the clamor. And one of the people that I think is most underappreciated for the extraordinary body of work that he produced is Auguste Dehors, who was a French designer, inventor, doll maker in Paris during the 1860s. And he did it first. He designed his portrait face, of which we have two examples in the Frau Büktas collection. This extraordinary example with her original parasol, wonderful dress, but I want you to look at the face of this doll. And I'm going to turn it sideways so you can see the profile of it as well, and the wonderful lines in the back of the costume. And then I want you to notice something that she's doing. She's tilting her head forward. Now, when you think about most French fashion dolls that you see, they're going this way, here and here. That's it. To the side, front, to the side. They do not nod. They do not tilt their head back and forth coquettishly. Dehors' most important patent was the patent for making the head move in a more realistic way. And here's another example of Dehors' absolutely gorgeous portrait lady with a very, very distinct, when I turn the profile, look at the shape of the nose, the little tiny chin, how absolutely wonderful it is. And this one has beautiful bisque hands as well. And I'm going to turn it completely around. When you look at the dolls from this early period, when she comes around again, please pay attention to her eyes, the cobalt blue. Absolutely wonderful. Sometime about, well, right after that 1867 exposition, the eyes changed. I've done a lot of looking into why they changed, because somewhere I had heard once that cobalt blue was poisonous, and that's why they stopped using it. And there seems to be a lot of controversy about that even today, but I don't know if that was the reason then. It may simply be that the doll makers found other ways to make eyes that had more threading in them and different colors instead of the one deep, rich cobalt blue. The benefits of the cobalt blue, number one, it helps you date a doll to a certain time period from like 1850 to 1865. And secondly, wow, is it beautiful? It's so dramatic, especially when they have those pale complexions. And then Monsieur Dehors, decided to produce his doll head with very, very other variations. And so look at this. Here we have one. She can tilt her head forward. She can lean from side to side. And she has a wooden body with bisque arms. So that would be one variation. Auguste Dehors applied to have his dolls shown in the 1867 exposition. And he actually ended up having his dolls shown in a group exhibition of dolls. But one of the people who was writing about that later in his book talked about the dolls, and he said that Dehors' dolls were designed so that if the Madame Hare came along, his dolls could say to them, well, who do you think you are? Because you just turn your head, and we can nod and turn our head coquettishly side to side. And he wrote a whole little story about this, which is in the Encyclopedia of French Dolls, the story of it, very interesting to read. And another example, this one can tilt her head and can tilt from side to side, nodding, tilting, back and forward in a very realistic manner, as opposed to just side by side. And in this example, the doll was made with an all-wooden, fully articulated body. And then we come to still another example using that rare Dehors articulation. Head tilts forward, tilts from side to side. I know it doesn't seem like a lot of movement, but if you try what I would call just your standard French poupée, you'll see that they do not move at all. They're very rigid except turning side to side. And this particular doll now has kid body with gusset jointing and bisque hands. So we have three different body variations there in opposed to the first two. But of the standard face, you have three body variations, and then you have a fourth. And this one also with cobalt blue eyes, but you see her face starting to change a little bit, I think, don't you? It's becoming a little bit more slender, Eyes are still a cobalt blue, and she has a wonderful costume. And please pay attention to this wig because, wow, this is what you dream to find on your French fashions. Wigs with this wonderful, soft, ringlet curled mohair. When Jumeau advertised them in the journals of the time, he would call this wig flottante, which I guess translates to floating, and it kind of looks like that to me, just floating angel curls. It's just absolutely beautiful. So all kid body. We have a kid body with bisque hands. We have an all wooden body, and we have a wooden body with bisque hands. All different body variations, and all having that rare Dehors mechanism. So there were so many other inventions, trying to find different techniques for making dolls more playable, more realistic. A lot of them revolving around the body, making the wooden body so it would articulate, making bodies that were durable. And then a lot of them, again, just like the Dehors doll that we just talked about, having to do with the articulation of the throat so it could be realistic. Now, most of the dolls that were made did a complete 365 revolve of the head. So the head was designed to swivel, but swivel totally. And along the line, Mr. Blampois came along and he said, well, that's crazy. Our heads don't spin, don't do that. They go here and they go here. And so he devised a system that he patented in which the head was locked in the swivel, so it could only turn realistically one way or the other way. And they're very desirable to find. And once again, I particularly left this doll out because I wanted you to see she not only has that rare locking neck mechanism, but this is like a pure example of dolls from the 1860 to 65 period. Very, very white complexion, very chubby little faces that contrast that. And then those brilliant blue cobalt eyes that just pop everything out. And I loved her because she's just in that costume. It fits perfectly, and it's an extraordinary antique costume, even with little details like her little watch on the chain and her little green leather purse that is on its original leather belt. Just a superb little petite example. And I have the two sister dolls here, or maybe the mother and child, however you would call them, because there are two examples of the dolls that bear the mark of Blampois on their front chest plate, the initials, and two examples of them, both in size, so you can see the different sizes that were made, and then this one again. You see I'm turning her head? That's as far as it will go. I'm going to turn it this way. That's as far as it will go. It has that built-in locking mechanism that keeps it from turning around. And then her little sister, however, she has a straight shoulder plate. It's not swiveling at all. So there were so many different variations that could be made. This one, however, I'll say, has a totally kid body, all kid. And this one has little bisque hands. So again, different variations. I love the little fan that she's holding, too. It's just very, very precious. I'll turn her around so you can see her from the back. The little examples like this in wonderful condition are so rare to find and very, very desirable. She actually has two fans I'm seeing now with hand-painted designs on them. There's one, and the other one is attached to her right here. Bonne fête. Have a good party. And this little doll from the back. Just beautiful wigs on these dolls and beautiful jewelry. Antique shoes on all of them. Just wonderful. It's always been amazing to me that during the period, the 1860 period, which was the real keynote of invention, that more attention was paid by the doll makers to the doll body than to the face. This is borne out when we look at the déposé marks that were registered in the French courts. However, you as collectors, I know what you look at first. You look at the face. That face has got to reach out to you. It's got to speak to you, and then you go from there. Then you're happy when the body is really great and a great invention. You absolutely love it when they're beautiful clothes, but it is the face. So I've chosen some dolls that I wanted to show you that have what I consider very, very extraordinary faces. The first one I'm going to show is classic. It's the classic face of the 1860 period. Now, I want to tell you just a little bit about the French doll industry at this time. There were not makers, per se, in the sense of someone who made the complete doll. They made the mold, they poured the mold, they did the design, they made the body, they made the wig, they made the clothes. It was more an assembly. Someone would have a small atelier, a small studio, and they would commission bisque heads to come from one place. They would commission bodies from another. They might make the costumes in their own studio. They might make the wigs, or they might commission those. All of these things came from little places, and they were pulled together, for the majority of the time, they were pulled together and sold as a unit, as a doll from that company, which is why there's so much confusion about how some dolls are identified and made at this time, and I'm going to show you one in just a minute. This particular doll is a classic doll with a classic face from like the 1865 period, and hidden under her costume is a wonderful, all-wooden, fully articulated body. So if you were to have this doll as a child or today as a collector, she can sit, she can kneel, she can walk, she can do so many activities that the kid body dolls were not able to do. And this was something that doll makers were really achieving. Her face is the generic and classic face, and once again, gorgeous cobalt eyes, and I do want you to see her costume. And look at her wonderful little basket that she is carrying with her little violets in there to match her costume. Just as an aside on the costumes, I'm sorry I keep diverting, but this color, so classic for the French Poupees of the 1860 period, that mauve color. Now, talk about a face. I've never seen it before. Well, yes, because we sold this doll to Mrs. Büktas, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago in a fine auction we had. But this is the only other time I've ever seen it, when we had it before and now. It's a very, very rare French fashion doll with a wonderful face with those painted eyes, and I'm going to turn it so you can see the face in all profile. Very, very dreamy eye expression, very elegant pointing of the nose and the chin, and very, very fine painting. And she has a kid body with bisque hands. One of the things I've noticed in Mrs. Büktas' collection that is, I think, so special is that so many of her dolls with kid bodies have the bisque hands with them, and it just makes them so elegant. And the hands sometimes are just beautiful sculpting on these dolls. And frankly, I sometimes think they're as beautiful as the faces. I guess I shouldn't say that, but I do. They're pretty nice. This doll, what a knockout. What an extraordinary, absolutely extraordinary work of art. I have argued against using the word portrait on dolls because you know, that one is that someone is a portrait of a queen or a princess or some historical figure, unless there's any actual documentation to that fact. But when you see a really luxury piece like this, I think it is fair to call it a portrait of an unknown person or an unnamed person, because the features are so distinctive and so fine that they really had to represent someone. The detail of the sculpting even extends to right here at the hollow of the throat. You can see little concave sculpting, and again, you need to always see these dolls in their profile as well, and you can see how finely sculptured they were. And again, look at the size of her. This had to be a luxury doll. Whenever I see the really, really fine examples or rare examples, I am always like nigh on to certain they were intended either for exhibition at the 1867 Paris Exposition or were intended as purchases from the buyers that were coming from all over the world at that time. Look at that concave. Oh, it's just absolutely fabulous. And again, brilliant cobalt eyes in a nice narrow shape. Now, here is one of the rarest of the French dolls. Again, we've only had maybe 4 of these in all of our years of industry, and this is the famous Rashard Doll. Now, it's beautiful to look at because the jewelry is painted on there and then with a little crystal hole looking into it. The design itself, I mean, it was lacking. It was lacking in a certain amount of sense because it was designed that you could see through the crystal. Now, it would either be clear in this case, or sometimes there would be like the stanhope or the figure in it that if you held like little things up to your eyes, you could actually see a photographic image in there. It was a lot of the beginning of work with photographic work. And this man, Mr. Rashard, designed this idea of putting jewelry or ornaments on objects and then having the opening at the back of the object so you could have the light that could see through. Well, of course, there's a problem with a doll because the design is on the shoulder plate. And when you put the shoulder plate head on a body, all of a sudden there's no opening left there anymore. So the doll does have the opening at the back shoulder plate, a big oval cutout. You can see his signature inside. You can see exactly how it's made. Unfortunately, just like every other Rashard doll made, you can't really see what he intended you to see because the body is blocking it. So he didn't put a lot of thought into it, but it's an extremely rare and extraordinarily beautiful doll. And again, that white piqué costume, and as far as I'm concerned, you can never have too much white piqué and too much soutache embroidery. And then another doll of which I have never seen another one like this. We tend to think of the Germans as having made the ladies with the sculpted bonnets, but here is a French doll with sculpted white bisque bonnet and a brim of which there's a black velvet applied to it, and then the hair that is coming down from below that brim. I'm going to turn it so you can see it all the way around. Very, very wonderful and rare French fashion. Again, I've never seen another one with a sculpted bonnet, and there's the top so you can see. Very sweet petite size, too. So some of the unusual novelties that are being made, and I wanted to show you a few unusual body novelties next.